What is up, YouTube, and welcome back to another episode of Curtis Review. I hope you've all had an amazing summer, and I decided that as we wrap things up for the summer this year, I wanted to do a summer movie and TV roundup, just catching you up on the other things I've been watching that I haven't covered on the channel. It's been quite the year for me. I have had a lot of bad luck. While I'm not quite sure if I align with the idea of luck and how much that actually works in our daily lives, a lot has happened this year. I lost my dog in July. I put out a video recently about the Dragon Ball Z movie Bio Broly that got a copyright strike by Toei Animation. For those of you who did see that before it was taken down, you may see that come out in the future. Watch it again, it'll probably be a little different. I may put a couple other spins on it, so stay tuned for that. I'm definitely just taking it on the chin, and I'm gonna try to move forward and just learn from that, but it was definitely a difficult blow while still dealing with grief and starting a new job. And I'm working in a call center, and it's remote, but it sucks. And I'm just happy to be back here filming and working on another video for you all. So, I think I'm getting a call. Hello, this is Jake with Curtis Reviews. How can I help you today?
Hi, is this Curtis Reviews? You suck!
Okay, well, maybe just leave a comment and subscribe next time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Click. Anyway, enough about me. I've watched quite a lot of awesome stuff this past summer, so without further ado, let's get started going through this list. Barbie, directed by Greta Gerwig. This was one that you'll remember me talking about if you watched my top 5 anticipated movies of 2023 video back in January. Barbie was hype for me from the get-go. The fact that it's directed by Greta Gerwig and co-written with Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig was enough for me to get into a theater seat alone. I had zero doubts when the first trailer dropped that this would be anything less than an absolute banger. And it kind of is. It lost me a little bit in the middle, the Will Ferrell and the Mattel boardroom stuff and the car chase sequence that felt kind of like a commercial, but I never stopped having fun the entire time. This might be my favorite Margot Robbie performance to date. She was so captivating as stereotypical Barbie. It's also funny that a movie that is so pro-women happens to have its spotlight stolen by Ryan Gosling as Ken, but that's to the movie's benefit, not to its detriment. He's stellar, he's hilarious, and he keeps the madcap energy of the Barbie playhouse alive and vibrant. It kind of feels like someone took a scrapped script for Toy Story 6, made it a bit darker and more adult, with psychedelic set designs and transitions, just so much popping color. It's an adventure from beginning to end, and I can't wait to watch it again. I'm not even that big of a musical guy, but the musical numbers in this movie were pitch perfect. The soundtrack overall was great, and it really helped nail that Barbie vibe. The cool thing with these toy movies is that at the end of the day, it's about people who grew up playing with a piece of plastic and how pivotal that molded piece of plastic was to their growing up. America Ferrera was a masterstroke to cast in this movie, as she is both parts mature and childlike in her nature, with a natural softness and yet a firm maternal quality, as well as just kind of being a badass. That nostalgia quality is unavoidable in my old age. And looking back, my regression during the pandemic into nostalgia and things that I enjoyed during my childhood have made me appreciate even more the toys that made me. Beau is Afraid, directed by Ari Aster. I watched Beau is Afraid super hungover after a blast of a weekend with friends who had come to visit from out of town, from Lexington and Chicago. We went and saw Amtrak, who's an electronic music artist, at a local venue. One of the best nights of my 30s by far. So the night before, I had had way too much beer and tequila, and the next day my girlfriend was like, hey, why don't we watch Beau is Afraid? As my stomach gurgled and sweat droplets dribbled down my face, I watched Joaquin Phoenix have the saddest cum of all time. I really liked Beau is Afraid. Visually, it was stunning, and the script was just super ADHD, but in the best way. The movie was long, but rarely did I feel the runtime. Things do lag in the second act, and I didn't get much from that portion of the movie, but it still gave me that what the fuck is going on vibe that Ari Aster just nails. It is absolutely wild that this movie even got made to me. It's messy, confusing, and I imagine when it was playing in theaters, people probably walked out of this one. The beginning of the movie is awesome, just just balls to the wall. What the hell is going on? Stimulation overload, just crazy batshit stuff is happening. And we see that the way that Ari Aster portrays Bo's experience, along with how Joaquin Phoenix mirrors those feelings on his face and how much he's doing with this like bumbling buffoon of a character, is Ari Aster's vision of what America looks like and what America feels like. Through the lens of this stunted, broken man with the worst Oedipus complex, we see how sickening, anxiety-ridden, and dirty the world is through Bo's eyes. It's even more sickening watching Phoenix play this guy who somehow hasn't been able to do anything with his life up until this point except bang Parker Posey impossibly. I've come to expect more horror from Ari Aster, so it was welcome when this movie was touted as a horror comedy, and the movie is pretty damn funny. I'd even go so far to say that it can get kind of into that cringe comedy territory. It's also somehow Ari Aster's best and worst movie. I bet if they were to have made a version of this that was 2 hours long, it'd be a lot better. But I think the point of it is that it is a 3-hour long Oedipal epic. It's not often that a film tackles almost every anxiety, fear, and phobia that humanity has faced or dealt with. And that alone is reason enough for you to watch this movie too. Drive, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn. This was my first Nicholas Winding Refn film, and man, ice cold, baby, ice cold. Currently, I'm reading Tarantino's Cinema Speculation, and he talks about how Steve McQueen made this movie called Bullet. And reading this helped click a couple of things in my mind about Drive. First off, this was not the right movie to watch right after my dog died. I mean, I think it was like 2 days after she died that I logged this on Letterboxd. I wanted something distracting. I wanted something that would take me out of it a bit. This movie wasn't really the vibe. It was just a little bit too cold and lifeless. And I don't mean cold and lifeless in a bad way, but the movie has no heart. It has a soul, but it doesn't have a heart. It's all throbbing gristle, no fat, and carries a tremendous performance by Albert Brooks, who his name on the docket alone was enough for me to fucking watch this movie. Watching Drive in 2023 after knowing and feeling the hype that it had in 2011 when it released felt underwhelming to say the least. I kept scratching my head thinking like, this is the movie that everybody was freaking out about back then? Like, what the hell? What am I missing? But then I realized that at that point in time, the people seeing Drive and resonating with it and identifying with it and owning it as like a movie to them, like it's their movie, it's like a defining part of them and like their experience of cinema. Being that I'm now 32 and I've watched a lot of movies in between the time Drive came out and now that I'm watching it now at this point in my life, I've seen a lot of other good shit. I think Drive is still an important movie in a lot of ways. It's very vibey. It's not, I don't think it was ever gonna resonate with me as much as it might have if I'd seen it in the theater in 2011. There's like kind of a sort of like cool guy, like car aesthetic that didn't really click with me. So I feel like if you're like a car person, this movie might work more for you. Like maybe like if you're like a Fast and Furious kind of guy, but you're a little bit more artsy or something like that. There's another movie that came out around this time called Killing Them Softly with Brad Pitt and Scooter McNairy and James Gandolfini actually. That has a similar kind of dead, lifeless American dream is dying kind of feeling to it. It nails that a little bit more without all the overly visceral violence that Drive has. I think that Killing Them Softly does a great job of like kind of harnessing that late era mafia thing without over the topness that like some characters in Drive have, like Ron Perlman and even Albert Brooks. Like there's even like Ron Perlman I think is kind of on the mark for being a little bit of an overacting kind of guy. That's not to say he's a bad actor. It is like Drive's more cartoony, it's more colorful. This Killing Them Softly movie I'm comparing only because it has a similar kind of like dead tone. It's very nihilistic and very hopeless about like where America was going at the time that it released. That said, Refn set out to make a sleek and elegant action movie and he really nailed it. Ryan Gosling is nothing short of brilliant in this role. He's quiet, stoic, playing the driver, aka the kid. He does a great job with the material. It's fun. He pops on screen. He's a great comic book kind of protagonist. So it's successful in that way. And if you're into that kind of thing, definitely check this one out. It's a nice little like like, 2010s gem that, if you're like me and you missed it, it's definitely worth throwing on one day if you're looking for something that's just gonna give you that kind of vibey, like, smoke weed in your basement kind of thing. Like, it's essentially a Western doused in LA haze, neon, and a stunning coat of paint. Underneath that paint, a rust is building, and thus is the tragic landscape of the movie Drive. Now we're going to talk about the movie She Said, directed by Maria Schrader. My friend Kyle recommended this movie. Shout out Kyle. I did not like this movie very much. Zoe Kazan, Carey Mulligan put in some career best performances that broke the story about Harvey Weinstein's sexual misconduct and sexual abuse allegations, along with a great supporting cast of familiar faces that, you may have seen on like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the HBO comedy Bored to Death. The movie has a stacked cast, so it's fun seeing those familiar faces pop up. This is subject matter that's ripe for adaptation, and there should be movies made about this so that more people are subjected to what is really going on in Hollywood and how these film executives have been taking advantage of young women for decades. The movie does a really great job of portraying how monstrous, predatory, and just villainous Harvey Weinstein was to these various women that he assaulted and abused and mistreated. They nailed that. It has a very chilling and ominous vibe whenever you hear the phone calls. You never quite see his face. It doesn't fall into that like Dahmer, like serial killer navel gazing kind of thing where it's like they're not making this look any pretty. Like, this is ugly stuff and they make it look ugly. The movie does make a couple of decisions that does impact the way the meaning of the movie and its story lands for the audience. First off, the soundtrack does it no favors as it adds this overly dramatic vibe and quality that took me out of the movie almost entirely. Like, it was so dramatic. It did not make sense tonally. I think something that may have been a little bit more ambient and less like overtly sad. Use that during the Harvey Weinstein stuff, that works well, but when it's like the reporting stuff and they're in the weeds doing these interviews, don't make it so tense. I'm sure it was intense for these women. This was a very serious time for them. They were working hard to break this story that felt impossible to break, and they were going against the odds of this titan of the movie industry who just controlled everything. It was horrifying. I just feel like the tone of the movie lacks so much, and it felt boring a lot of the time. I even found myself uncomfortably laughing at some of the musical cues because they just did not match up at all with the subject matter taking place on screen. This is an important story. This is a turning point for Hollywood. This is a turning point for women's rights and feminism. This is an important movie that should have been made. I just wish it was made a little bit better. I think it was boring. I think it lagged, and it definitely did not chug along. It was slow paced, and my friend Kyle described it to me when he recommended it. That's like a very in the weeds reporter thing. I don't know if that's necessarily gonna work for everybody, but if you're into that kind of thing, this movie may work for you. These women's stories deserve to be heard. We need to hear them. We need to learn from them. Like, these traumas, they're important for us to know so that we can grow our own empathy and we can be better advocates for how we treat women and everyone in the world. Why this monster should have been and has been brought down. Now we're talking about Platonic Season 1, starring Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne. This show kind of came out of nowhere. I saw the ads as we were finishing up the last season of Ted Lasso, and it looked really cool. Seth Rogen had like bleached hair. He was wearing all these like awesome dope fits, and Rose Byrne was in it, who I knew from Bridesmaids. She's hilarious. She was great in that movie. I know that they had worked it together in the past. They had really good on-screen chemistry. The vibes were vibing already from there. Like, it looked like a good comedy. It was also probably something that, along with a lot of Apple TV shows for me, unfortunately, I get home one night from like playing cards or, going to see a friend. She had this on, and I really kind of got sucked into it. Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne play Will and Sylvia, who are two long-term friends who kind of drifted apart when Will got married to the woman that he eventually divorces, and then they reconnect after he divorces this woman. They're, that's the whole conceit of the show, is they're longtime friends. Their platonic friendship is fully on display to lots of comedic effects, a lot of fun little plot lines that they put together, and it's not super serious. It's not trying to break any kind of TV records or be the best show ever. It's just a good comedy, and we don't get a lot of good comedies or sitcoms these days. Like, they're coming out all the time, very much in sort of a late era TV where a lot of it's still prestige TV. You get 1 or 2 seasons, and Platonic feels like one of these shows that it may only get get one season, or it may get like 6 or 7, because with Seth Rogen attached, how can they not make more of this? With Rose Byrne attached. The cast is great. The guy who plays Sylvia's husband, Charlie, is super good in this show. Crazy that right out of the gate, this show, 10 episodes, hit its stride immediately. Straight to streamer kind of TV shows really have gotten so good about within seconds of after the credits roll. It's just, you start to feel like you know these characters and you've known them for so long, and they really did a good job of nailing that in this show. If you're into Seth Rogen, check this out. If you're into Rose Byrne, check this out. If you're just into a good feeling comedy, you know, you like your Sandler comedies from the 2000s, if you like those feel-good rom-coms from the mid-2000s and the 90s, this is for you. Check out Platonic on Apple TV. This Fool, Season 2, starring Chris Estrada and Frankie Quinones. Back when This Fool Season 1 dropped on Hulu, I had just finished up some other show. I just needed a new show to put on. I didn't know anything about this. I'd never heard of Chris Estrada or Frankie Quinones or Jamar Neighbors. Then I noticed that someone by the name of Michael Imperioli, aka Christopher Moltisanti, shows up on screen. I got kinda hooked. This show is fucking hilarious. One of the most compelling and even thought-provoking comedies that I've seen on TV in the last 10 years. Starring Chris Estrada as Julio and Frankie Quinones as reformed gang member Luis Hernandez. This Fool is absolutely one of the best shows on television right now and should not be slept on. Estrada and Quinones have amazing chemistry on screen. They're so funny. I mean, Frankie Quinones did not get enough recognition for how funny and also heartwarming, and he's a good actor. He's great. And Chris Estrada too. It's amazing that I haven't seen these guys do anything else. They're great actors. Their timing is incredible. The aforementioned Michael Imperioli playing the Minister Payne, who leads the nonprofit that Julio works at called Hugs Not Thugs. They help ex-felons and former gang members get help, get education, so that they can turn their lives around and get the rehabilitation they need, that the prison system and the police system and all that fucking American bullshit doesn't take care of people that they incarcerate. It's cool that they made this really funny show while also kind of shining a light on a political area that's very important, and people need to know how fucked up the prison industrial complex is. It's unapologetically punk as fuck and DB'd out the ass with just the right amount of mariachi. The soundtrack slaps, and I found myself shazamming things all the time while watching this show. In season 2, they lean a little bit more into the bizarre, which is fun, but it kind of took me out of it a little bit. I was kind of wanting more of what season 1 was doing with its sort of wacky comedy, sitcom-y kind of stuff. In season 2, Julio and Luis end up opening a coffee shop called Mugs Not Thugs. Hijinks ensue, but as in season 1, there is a through line of emotional, mental development for both Julio and Luis. Luis is dating now. Julio is recognizing that he's deeply depressed and he needs to do something about that. This isn't just a show that's for laughs. They're talking about like issues that people are going through, and they're important to talk about. And not only that, but they portray felons in a positive way. And that's something that you don't see on most mainstream television shows. Shout out to the episode this season starring Julio's mom, played by Laura Pentalano, where after retirement she searches for new meaning and ends up doing some ghost hunting. She is so captivating to watch and so funny in that episode. I highly recommend you check out this show, and if you don't check it out, you're a dumbass. Dragon Ball GT, the Black Star Dragon Ball saga. I figured there was no time like the present. I'm 32 and I've never watched Dragon Ball GT. I'm in a resurgence of Dragon Ball fandom in my personal life. As you know, I've done many a Dragon Ball videos on my channel, so I figured it was time to just dive in. I've almost finished the entire Black Star Dragon Ball saga as of recording this episode. I'm about 19 or 20 episodes in, and it sucks, y'all. It really does. The pacing is atrocious, the jokes and sight gags don't land, and I'm an adult man criticizing a children's TV show. That being said, while the soul of Dragon Ball is completely lost in this series, the world of GT is quite vibrant. When Goku, Pan, and Trunks eventually land on a mechanized planet called M2, there's a Mobius vibe a la the Inkle that really worked for me. And the episode prior to that, where Pan nearly dies trying to find water in this endless desert and starts hallucinating about how she may have let down her family and lied about trying to escape Earth and go on this adventure with Trunks and her grandfather Goku, that stuff really hit for me. It's just unfortunate that it took like 18 episodes to get to a point where the show was actually kind of compelling. And aside from that, the only other remarkable thing that really happened in the episodes leading up to this was a really creepy character named Daltaki, who ends up just being a plot device for us to get to Dr. Mew and General Rildo and the double crossing of Giru. I do plan in the future to do a longer form video after I've done an entire watch of Dragon Ball GT. I wanted to talk about it because I really love Dragon Ball. I want to know more about it. I want to dive into this series. I want to say that I had watched it and what the baby stuff is about, the Super Android 17 and the Omega Shenron. Like, I've never watched it. I want to see all that stuff, even if probably not as good as Dragon Ball Z, or my brother loves it, so, you know, I gotta give it a chance. I'd rather have more Dragon Ball than no more Dragon Ball, even if it's not the good kind of Dragon Ball. Capiche? And while I have you, before I say goodbye, I also recommend the ongoing, at this time, third and final season of Reservation Dogs. The second season flopped for me a little bit, but I am loving the third season. It's cerebral, heady, weird, funny, captivating in a way that the first season was, but amplified to a new level. Third episode of the season is about residential schools, and it is absolutely fucking chilling, ultimately cathartic. And that's everything I watched this summer, for the most part. Comment below what you watched this summer, and let me know if there's anything that I missed that's new or that I haven't seen or didn't mention that you liked, and I may check it out and talk about it on the channel in the future. Until next time, stay cool out there, drink lots of water, get your pumpkin spice latte on, because it's gonna be fall before you know it, and peace. As my stomach gurgled and sweat droplets came as the two reporters that broke the story about Harvey Weinstein's sexual misconduct. As far as sexual misconduct, and into